Welcome to Critical Junction episode 42. I'm Mark.
I'm Jill.
And unfortunately, Luke couldn't join us this evening, so it's just the two of us. I'm not going to sing the song because that would be embarrassing.
Just the two of us.
That's the one.
I have no shame.
All right. So on March 27th, on March 27th, 2018, riding the wave of nostalgia television, popular 1990s sitcom Roseanne returned to cable to the delight of many. A mere couple of months later, the show was cancelled on May 29th, following a racist tweet by the show's titular frontrunner about Valerie Jarrett, a senior advisor to President Barack Obama, who happens to be African American. Roseanne Barr, who played a Trump supporter on the show, a reflection of her actual political affiliations, said, quote, "If the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby, it would equal Valerie Jarrett," end quote. Hours after the tweet, TV network ABC pulled the plug on the show, stating, quote, "Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values," end quote. Barr later issued an apology, though she also claimed she posted the tweet while under the influence of sleep aid Ambien. Ambien later issued a statement saying racism is not a known side effect of the drug. The issue of the show's cancellation following Barr's racist remarks raises the question of whether ABC acted appropriately, or if the incident is an example, as some free speech advocates claim, of censorship going too far. So, should everyone, including celebrities and others whose words reach millions of people and influence their actions, have complete and total liberty to say whatever comes to mind, regardless of whether whatever comes to mind be hateful or inciting violence? Or is there a time and place for censorship? What constitutes acceptable censorship, and who gets to determine what should or should not be censored? Let's talk about that, shall we?
We shall.
Let's. Without Luke.
Yeah. So,
By the way, if you're listening, Luke, we miss you. You're here.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm a little unsure about not having him around to keep me in check. Keep the pace going. We'll see. So with this Roseanne thing, The first thing that struck me about it was that, so right off the bat, they're calling it a racist tweet, and yet it seems, without any context, like she must be referring to the racist trope of just using Planet of the Apes as some kind of a derogatory thing for black people. It's like a meme, basically. But I've heard that apparently Roseanne was just invoking it specifically because Valerie Jarrett literally looked very much like the Helena Bonham Carter character in the Planet of the Apes remake from 2001.
Really?
Yeah, and that's all she was referring to. And now the fact that Roseanne has also gone off the rails into like the alt-right conspiracy theory type of psychology and stuff like that, it makes it easy to dismiss anything she might say in and interpret it in the worst possible way. And I'm skeptical and I'm reticent, and I'm not sure if maybe that tweet was just used and a misattribution was made where they basically said this was just a blatant racist tweet when it wasn't necessarily. Although I've seen other things she said that seems to indicate some weird comments about Jews and stuff like that too. So I don't know.
As with anything, context is more or less difficult to stay within when it comes to social media, especially with Twitter, right? Like I don't follow her on Twitter, so they're just taking this one tweet and using that as their justification for canning the show, because just taken out of context, it would certainly appear racist, but whether or not she actually meant it or if there was any racist intent behind that tweet, I can't say for sure. I don't know if anyone really can.
So I think my main problem is that regardless of whether or not the intent was racist, there's a plausible explanation for how it might not have been specifically racist, and that plausible explanation, barring the existence of mind reading in the human species, means that nobody who says it was definitely racist is actually right. Like that's too hasty of a jump.
Right.
I mean, you have to have some acknowledgement of your imperfect knowledge. You know, like you might be wrong about it being racist,
right.
or they might be wrong about it.
So do we think ABC was justified in canceling the show based on that one tweet?
So yeah,
because prior to that there was no reason for the show to be canceled. It looked like it was pulling in some good ratings during the first couple of episodes, right? And everything was going well. And just today they announced that they're going to be relaunching the show without Roseanne.
What are they going to call it?
The Connors. So it's going to be...
Okay, so now it's a spin-off rather than...
it's going to be Roseanne without Roseanne, essentially.
Huh.
Kind of like that Garfield without Garfield cartoon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's really funny. But anyway, that's a different topic. So yeah, ABC's censoring Roseanne outright.
I have seen that Garfield without Garfield.
It's hilarious. If you haven't checked it out, by the way, not a sponsor, but if you'd like to sponsor the show, Garfield not without Garfield, we would love to have it. But yeah, so some people definitely see the cancellation of the show based on that tweet as a form of censorship.
Yeah.
They're disallowing a form of freedom of speech or a form of expression, and silencing her effectively is what some people are arguing.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to that too. What's his name? Jonathan Haidt. Do you know this guy? He's a professor at NYU, I believe. Professor of I think he's actually a professor of ethics, or at least he teaches business ethics in the School of Business there. And I think he's also like a psychologist, or he talks about a lot about social psychology and sociology. And he's talked about something called hyper accountability as something that's kind of emerged in this sort of recent climate of safe spaces and safe spaces and no platforming and this kind of stuff.
Right.
And this thing like Roseanne basically making a tweet that is ambiguously racist, but is meant as a joke with a conservative bent. She's accountable for what she says, but the spirit in which she said it, and the seriousness with which she said it, I don't know. Maybe sort of deplatforming her and no careering her is a little bit excessive. Maybe that's an example of this kind of hyper accountability. You know, it's super. We've all got the social media at our fingertips, and culturally, we just start to use it as a more benign kind of like immediate communication of off the cuff thoughts and quips and stuff like that. So these are things that we all do on an individual basis offline, right, with our little circle of friends and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we don't expect when we make an off-colored joke or if we have an unthought out thought that struck us as funny for a second or something and we blurt it out, we don't expect to lose our jobs over it or to get some kind of huge backlash like that. So I don't know. I tend to think that this is an instance of hyper accountability, and I know that these TV guys, I mean, they don't really have any obligation to any of the people who are the personalities who are on the shows that they are paying for and broadcasting. Basically, they can fire anybody for any reason, pretty much, I guess. But we're free to criticize those reasons, right? And I think maybe this one is more cynical than virtuous.
Yeah, because the reason they gave, like I said during the introduction, was because her comments weren't in keeping with their values or whatever. But beyond that, I want to talk about the issue of deplatforming for a second, which you brought up just a couple of minutes ago. Would you consider that to be a form of censorship? Like disallowing either a professor or someone with different viewpoints from speaking at college campuses, for example. Like Jordan Peterson has been, I think, deplatformed on a couple of occasions. There was an Ottawa U professor who was supposed to speak at the Ottawa Library just a couple of months ago, and she was, I think, she wasn't barred from speaking, but protesters pulled the fire alarm and they had to evacuate and all that stuff. So they were, their main point was that they didn't want any kind of racist remarks being broadcast in public, or they didn't want her to have a platform to discuss those ideas. Which to me, I'm of two minds of that. Like on the one hand, I don't really think that there should be room for those types of comments to be made, but at the same time, we need to be able to listen and critically evaluate those comments and shut them down in a democratic fashion, rather than just saying outright, no, you can't say that. Right?
Yeah.
If you're opposed to what somebody is saying, speak out against it. Give an opposing viewpoint. Give a viewpoint that's more rational and more well thought out, and don't deplatform someone just because you disagree with them. I think the same could be said about what Roseanne said, without defending racism, of course. But, I'm not sure if canceling the show was the right thing for them to do. I don't know. I'm not defending the issue of racism by any means. I'm just saying I'm not sure whether or not ABC acted in the right way in this particular instance.
Well, I mean, I don't really think the tweet really differs much from the flavor of the show that they had produced up until then. There were already 8 or 9 episodes of this this season of Roseanne that had come out, and in there, like right off the bat in the first episode, they're clearly portraying the Connors now as like as Trump supporters, the kind of disaffected economic angst type of Trump supporter, and they're making fun of the pussy hats and the activists on the left and stuff, who's being kind of portrayed by Roseanne's sister there. So it's not like ABC didn't know that they were doing a sitcom about a family that's meant to, on some level, represent the 40% of the country that's actually kind of on that side of the fence right now, right? So her putting out this tweet that's making fun of a politician or public figure that she maybe disagrees with on a political level, and maybe even in her mind on a moral level or something, if she thinks that this person is corrupt, or I have no idea. I don't really know too much about Valerie Jarrett. I just don't see it as being that much off of what they were already broadcasting, 8 hours worth of, or 8 shows worth of. So, yeah.
That's an interesting point. Like, it was definitely in keeping with the character of the show, like you said. Like, not only her character, but the general feel and atmosphere of the show itself. Then again, if she had a valid criticism of Valerie Jarrett, she should have just criticized her rather than making this comparison,
Yeah,
because
but now you're going down this other road of you're allowed to express any idea you want, but you have to express it this way. She's a comedian first and foremost.
Right.
She's not a social critic. She's not an academic. So
fair.
Of course the flavor of her form of maybe speaking truth to power as she sees it will be jokes like that are not meant to be hyper sound on a on an argumentative kind of level.
Yeah, on second thought, I don't really think Roseanne Barr would be able to adequately, come up with some type of valid criticism. I think she was. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, insofar as much as anybody is maybe capable of having a valid thought or opinion on something without necessarily being an expert in it. I mean, yeah.
We do it all the time.
That's it. That's what this whole show is about. But your first question or the main question there was whether this kind of deplatforming constitutes censorship, and I think it absolutely does.
Right.
I've heard it argued that this isn't censorship, and some people want to pretend that free speech and censorship is to be narrowly defined as strictly a question of government interference and what the government has the right to tell you to do or not do.
I don't agree with that.
No, I mean that's just plain false on the level of basically everything we know about how free speech, the classical liberal concept of free speech was devised and argued for. It totally wasn't on the level of legalism or constitutionality or government rights. It was basically a meta-ethical argument.
Right.
Like the idea of free speech is that it allows ideas to be expressed, and then bad ideas are meant to be deconstructed and demolished, with the truth of better ideas actually prevailing over weaker ideas, right? Like, so it's
But then again, we discussed this on a previous episode. I can't remember which one, but that whole concept was put together before the advent of any kind of mass media or social media in particular, right? With the ability to spread information so rapidly, it's a matter of
that ideal maybe isn't practicable this day and age.
Not anymore. Exactly. It's a matter of who can scream the loudest, who can overtalk the other side, and that's the idea that sticks.
Yeah, and see, I don't think that's necessarily so. I think there's sort of a mistake being made where the fact of social media, or the way social media works, is kind of making it so that we feel like we have to sort of justify it or take. Okay, so it's the case now that ideas can shout down other ideas, but it's not the case that because that's true, we have to find a way to legitimate or legitimize or justify shouting down as an actual debate practice or as an actual sort of form of expression. It's like those white noise machines or whatever that they use at the Jordan Peterson speech at U of T, or it's I mean, I've heard people sort of justifying that you use these tactics as just another kind of consequence in a free speech area, but that's totally violating that first principle of actually being able to hear the completely flawed idea so that you can know why that idea is flawed. And all that kind of white noising and shouting down, it's just about prejudicially kind of identifying classified ideas or statements, and then without having to actually do the hard work of demolishing them argumentatively, logically, with evidence, whatever. You're just able to say, okay, there's an orthodoxy, there's a dogma, there's some ideas that can broadly be classified as okay, and there's some ideas that you're not allowed to actually express them so that you can then deconstruct them anymore.
Right.
You have to shut them down, kind of censor them.
Yeah, like social media is extremely reactionary, and that's what I was talking about. It's like it's not like the idea of shouting down your opponent isn't. It's not a justification. It's just the way people act on social media.
Yeah.
It's the way that people behave themselves and conduct themselves, and it's just social media makes it really, really easy to just forego the entire concept of critical thinking and logic and just attack and yell and shout and come up with all these blistering vitriolic statements against your opponent. And that's what gets noticed the most. It's not the well thought out, well-rounded criticisms that stand out more in people's minds when it comes to things like Twitter or Facebook or any social medium. It's which group is the loudest. And that's what people tend to glom onto, right? It's just,
and that's a shame. It's a kind of glorification of like juvenile schoolyard bully tactics.
Yeah.
Basically, those juvenile schoolyard bully tactics, which we used to recognize as being limited to that domain, and then once you grow up and you're out of high school and you're in university or you're in a career and you're getting a job. When you use those tactics, you used to rightfully be laughed at for being incompetent at actually being able to defend your point and actually being able be perceptive about how the thing you're trying to criticize is wrong, right? I mean, now it seems like we want to say that because kids and because early education actually less and less actually includes any talk of philosophy or literature or civics. Those have kind of been systematically sort of erased from the curriculum of most public schools in the K to 12 kind of school, and so now we've got these students that come out of that kind of education. They're thrown into university where suddenly they're being exposed to ideas and stuff, and they're learning about ideas, but they don't even have the fundamental kind of pre-education to know why they're not actually equipped to criticize them or to defend them. Right. It's just they've basically been trained only to be able to learn a dogma by rote, and that has to be a dogma that's kind of prejudged by society to be the right one.
Yeah. I've said this many times before, but schools and the education system need to start teaching kids not what to think, but how to think.
Yeah.
Rather than getting them to memorize all these things by rote.
Well, that's exactly the role of an educator, and I think most teachers think that that's what they're doing too, and a lot of students now think that if you have somebody who's teaching who personally has a point of view and you're aware of what that point of view is, then anything that comes out of their mouth is dismissible as being only some type of representation of that agenda or that tribe. That point of view seems to concord with. Right. But a teacher is there to teach you how to think, like you said, not what to think. And in teaching you how to think, he's trying to equip you to, if you want, actually attack whatever point of view that he might admit that he personally holds.
I think that's true in college and university, but in like high school and K to 12, not so much. I don't really see, like, for example, the Socratic method being used in the lower grades. It's more something that's applicable to, higher education. That's when you really get the discussions going. That's when you really start engaging people's minds and getting them to think about all these different ideas.
Yeah.
I just wish that kind of approach was taught early on in education, rather than waiting for people to get to college and university to start, teaching these abilities and tools, and be using them. Like it would be really, really helpful to start getting these tools to people much, much earlier. Because then it's not only a matter of being able to evaluate what an instructor or a teacher is trying to relay to a student. It's applicable to every situation in life. It's applicable to who you vote for example. It's applicable to the things you buy. As an example, I don't know if you heard about this guy in Vancouver selling the hot dog water.
No.
So, okay.
What?
Total tangent. Totally unrelated to the idea of censorship, but related to the idea of critical thinking. So he sold these vials of hot dog water for like $40 a piece.
Okay.
And he made all these outrageous claims about the different miracles this hot dog water could do. Like he put something on the back label, I think it was, or maybe he just said it, but he's like, normal water has to be filtered through your system and it's ineffective and whatever, but hot dog water is more like sweat, so it bypasses the lymphatic system. It's much more efficient.
What?
And all the people are lapping this shit up, and one guy is rubbing the hot dog water on his scalp trying to get his hair to grow, all this craziness. And the entire point of why he did this, the campaign lasted a couple of days. This guy was like, I think he's a tour organizer or something, and just like a whatever.
Okay.
The whole point behind this idea was to get people to start critically evaluating marketing schemes.
It's like the house hippo.
Yeah. Yeah. And he came out
PSA?
just today. There was an article that came out today that just, where he admitted, no, it's all bullshit. I want people to start thinking about this. Start critically evaluating marketing campaigns, because this is obvious crap. Why would you buy into this? It's hot dog water.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If people were taught critical thinking skills a lot earlier, I think 60 people or whatever who bought this $40 hot dog water wouldn't have bought it. Yeah. Probably. Hopefully. Anyway. Yeah. I wouldn't have bought it.
Well, I mean, just look at the resurgence of the flat earthers.
Oh, God. We're talking about them again?
Well, we did an episode on them, so I don't need to talk about them too much. But I think the only reason why it's coming back, and there's a not insignificant number of people that are now ignorant enough to actually believe it again.
Right.
Something that's been dead for thousands of years, since long before Jesus even came along. Archimedes, I think it was, had come up with demonstrations for not only that the Earth is round, but I think they had already started trying to calculate the size of the planet
with the shadows and the sticks at different times. You can demonstrate that the Earth is round. You these experiments are demonstrable in reality. You can go out and do this shit yourself, right? And
but the fact that we're eroding this kind of critical reasoning aspect of education, and we're also doing this kind of sort of prejudicial categorization of what's absurd and what can't be talked about, I think that's having a bit of a backfire effect too.
Definitely.
For a long time, we did rightfully joke about people who were flat earthers and stuff like that, but the problem is by just relying on that ridicule now, and then no longer actually teaching why it's obvious that the Earth is round, we've just opened the door to have this ignorance just kind of infest us all again.
Right. Well, that separate issue, but this just came to mind. But the idea of blasphemy laws and that type of thing, like that, saying that you can't criticize the idea of a supernatural entity, or in the case of blasphemy laws, or things like, I don't know, if you're a Holocaust denier, you're shunned or whatever. Like, I don't think we should censor any idea. I think we should talk about them, discuss them, evaluate them, and criticize them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than just shutting them down. The same goes with deplatforming. If you disagree with somebody's platform, engage them, talk to them.
Yeah.
Why do you think that? And just have a conversation with this person, and maybe you might end up changing their mind if they're open to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the safe space trend and stuff like that. It's definitely like a kind of secular blasphemy. Type of phenomenon.
Secular blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
I didn't know we had such a thing. But no,
like,
you're right. Like,
if you're not representing part of the secular dogma that's allowed, then it's blasphemy, and you just can't actually.
I wouldn't paint it with such a broad stroke, because I don't think the entire secular community is like, you must toe the party line or else.
I'm not talking. No, I'm talking about the dogma being the.
Okay, so people who dogmatize secular ideas.
When I say secular, I don't mean like
secularists.
Secularists.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean non-religious.
So the non-religious version of blasphemy. Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think I agree. Like it's. Yeah. Yes. Switching gears a little bit, what do you think about the idea of, it happened in the South just recently, the removal of, Civil War era statues and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or, taking down John A. MacDonald's statue. I don't know if they did it or they're talking about it at one of the universities or whatever.
That's hilarious, considering that less than 2 years ago they actually changed the name of the parkway in the west end of Ottawa specifically to adopt John A's name, and then
should we have done that? Wasn't he kind of racist?
and now and so soon after we have this whole thing culturally happening where everybody who was a racist in the past or whatever, they have to be erased from the landscape.
Yeah, I think that's a fine example of censorship. It's like it's not necessarily a government initiative. It's more people rising up and wanting to censor the past. They want to whitewash the past and just I don't want to say pretend it never happened, but just not acknowledge it. I think that is a form of censorship, and I don't.
So ironically, I totally disagree.
Really? Okay.
On that one.
Now we have something to talk about.
Now we have, how far into the episode are we? We're a half hour in, and we finally have something to talk about. Okay. Yeah. So I totally disagree. I think with these monuments and statues and like naming of a road for a past figure, that kind of stuff is not meant just to teach us about those figures in the past, however important they might have been. That kind of stuff is more to venerate them, to put them in a place of, this is kind of representing our community's ideals or something like that. Not only our past, but our idealized kind of, our aspirations from the past kind of thing.
But the people who are opposed to the statues are opposed to it because they don't want them venerated due to this one aspect of their personality. They were like John A. MacDonald admittedly was a racist. He wanted to decimate the indigenous population. Yeah, I acknowledge that. He was also the father of Confederation.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I think they are trying to censor part of our history. They're trying to censor the fact that because he was a racist, they want to remove him entirely from the picture, which I find to be a form of censorship.
But they're only removing him from those monuments to him. They're not removing him from the textbooks. They're not removing him from.
It doesn't have to be a 100% blank, full stop kind of dismissal of him. It's still, I consider it to be still a form of censorship based on that one thing. They want to censor the image of John A. MacDonald rather than venerate him because he was racist. Right.
So, I mean, first of all, I have a problem with this kind of revisionist moralizing of people who are living in completely different contexts that contemporary people don't actually have a clue about.
Right.
Or they do on some superficial level and then immediately dismiss it. But like, you know, things like dismissing Thomas Jefferson as just a racist regressive because he was a slave owner, right? The ironic thing there is that he's at the vanguard of killing the kind of society that can keep slaves, you know. So there's a more complex thing going on there. It was, in his context, it was maybe normal to have indentured servitude and stuff like that. But that's not all he's about, right? And he's not like he's not like one of these Confederate kind of generals or whatever that's actually fighting to preserve slavery. But I understand how it's touchy, but but still I can't see the whole the idea of removing these sort of homages to someone who we do learn more about, maybe, and do learn to reevaluate. I don't see removing homages to them as a censorship of them, because you can because that's not the only way of learning about someone, and it's not even the most common way of learning about someone, or anywhere near the most important way of learning about history and historical figures. So I don't know. I can't see it as censorship, because it's not about erasing them from history. It's about not venerating them. Yeah,
I think I never said it was a matter of erasing them from history. It's a matter of not venerating them. I just have this I don't know. I just think that it's still a form of censorship. Not like, it might not be outright. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, because of my choking?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Careful there. Anyway.
Okay.
We may disagree on that point, and I can't remember how I was going to justify my position.
So maybe were you getting at that maybe it's a kind of censorship that can be justifiable? So it is censorship, but it's maybe a justifiable kind of censorship? Or?
I don't think it is justifiable.
You don't even think it is?
No, I think it's a form of censorship, and I disagree with it. Right? I don't think we should be tearing down these statues because...
But, I mean, we were fine with not having a parkway named after Sir John A. Macdonald for the entire history of Ottawa, and then we just gave that road his name. Now, if we want to change it back, it would be censorship, and it would be wrong.
Yes.
Even though it's only been that way for a year or two.
Yeah, I disagree with it. Like, we have the statues, we have the road, just leave it. Like, who cares?
No, but the road isn't gonna stop being...
We have the name of the... You know what I mean?
If you change the name.
Yeah, like, I don't think we should be changing it. Like, you can have the statue up there without necessarily, attaching that one aspect of his personality to that statue, right? Like,
sure.
Yeah, he's a racist, but Father of Confederation, he has a statue, so deal with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think people are I think it's
what about like if during the reign of the Nazis in I hate when arguments always go there, but it's always like the
Reductio ad Hitlerum
top of mind kind of extreme example, but like
what about the Nazis?
During the reign of the Nazis, let's say you have like statues erected to Hitler and stuff, and then once the war is over, do you just leave those there because facts are facts, and he was the head of state there for a while, and
well, there are a bunch of swastikas.
It would be censorship to remove those statues to Hitler.
There's still a bunch of swastikas on buildings in Berlin, for example. They just didn't take them down, right? Like, I don't know. Like, the Hitler thing is an extreme example, and I don't think any kind of solid argument can be based around it.
Okay.
So I'm not going to justify that with a response.
All right, fine.
Because reductio ad Hitlerum. Like, you cannot compare anything to Hitler. You cannot compare anything to Nazi Germany because it's a unique circumstance. It's an extreme circumstance, and that has to be taken, in context, and not applied universally to any other kind of thing. Because you can't make that argument.
Okay, so I mean, what about any other type of figure from history who's now seen as a villain, but at the time he was the boss of everything? So
Let's go with Stalin.
Sure. What about that? How about that?
I don't know.
Is it censorship, and is it wrong to remove a statue of Stalin that's given a position of prominence right in the middle of Moscow or something?
Well, they're historical figures. They're important aspects of history. I think it would be censorship.
And you think it would be wrong?
Depends on the circumstance.
What if you want to put in the place of that statue of Stalin, you want to put like a statue of I don't know, someone better, like Yuri Gagarin or something?
That'd be cool. Like replacing the statue, then does that become a matter of
Is that a matter of censorship, where you're actually finding more deserving figures in history that are more deserving of veneration and better represent the aspirations of your community and what your nation is trying to do and what your nation is holding up as the values?
Yeah, I think it depends on motivation.
Forward.
Like, if the motivation is to venerate someone of higher caliber, someone who's contributed to society in a more positive way, let's say, like Yuri Gagarin or whatever, and you remove the Stalin statue for that one, I don't consider that censorship. I think that's just you're building up someone else in his place because they happen to do more for better, right? But just removing the statue on its own, I would consider to be a form of censorship.
So all of this statue removing for you would be okay if you could only remove a statue if you intended to replace them with someone better.
I wouldn't say only, but if that were a driving factor behind it, then I would be more inclined to accept it.
Yeah, I don't find that very consistent or convincing. Like,
yeah, well, I'm on the spot and I haven't really thought about this. Yeah, like I'm.
This is where maybe Luke might have been able to help.
Yeah, maybe.
He was kind of taking you off the spot.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not married to a position on this one way or
Right.
another, but just off the cuff, I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right then.
We were talking deplatforming.
Yeah.
And whatnot. Removal of statues. We've just covered. What else can we talk about? What else is considered censorship?
What else is considered
Not being able to say fuck before 9 p.m. on television. What do you think about that?
What about okay, so the television is a dying medium anyway. Nobody cares about it.
TV, if you'd like to sponsor the show, we realize you have no money and can't do it.
But people are replacing their TVs with their computers, with the internet, right? And ironically, I think people have an instinct against censorship a lot more with the internet, even though institutions that have power and control have an easier way of doing it online. I think people on an individual level are more kind of incensed about censorship on the web.
Yeah, I find
we were fine with it on TV for so many years with the beeps and the black bars and shit, and we just totally went along with it. But on the internet, nobody stands for that shit.
Right.
At least not consciously.
I think one of the reasons for that is because initially the internet was supposed to be totally free. It was supposed to be open and everyone could access it. You could say whatever the fuck you want. Fuck. And just not worry about censorship. Like, it was the Wild West, and when the internet was first established, there were no rules governing it whatsoever. It was figuratively the Wild West. And And that's how we evolved along with the internet. It's how we got to know it. It's how we, that's the idea that we grew up with during the early days, and that's the idea that kind of propagated. And now, whenever people start introducing the idea of censoring the internet, I think that's one of the main factors behind the backlash. It's because we're so accustomed to it just being completely open and completely free for all.
Yeah.
Whereas with television, like you said, it's been censored from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think they're
But now with like the death of net neutrality, and with all of this foreign interference we've seen with botnets and this overt controlling of narratives on social media.
I'm nodding enthusiastically, by the way.
Yeah. So there's proposals coming out there that are actually trying to kind of stick a wedge in there to open up a place for some censorship to actually be accepted on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about like these tools being applied to Facebook and Google and stuff to prevent this kind of hostile encroachment, of propaganda and stuff like that.
Right.
So I mean, do you think any of that can be justified?
Again, I think it would depend on the situation. Like if it's an incitement to violence, no, censor that shit. But if it's like somebody expressing an idea you disagree with or whatever, then not so much. But it's a fine line to tread.
Yeah.
Between censoring bad ideas and censoring dangerous ideas.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of dangerous ideas, I don't think we should be opposed to censoring those.
Yeah.
But if it's a matter of, shutting someone down because you don't like what they're saying, without justification or without any valid reason behind it, that's a different story.
This is reminding me of this concept or this idea of, I think it's called concept creep. So when people talk about, for example, incitement to violence or doing violence, the idea sort of evolutionarily in the culture can kind of grow to start meaning more than what it initially meant. So now doing violence actually can mean giving offense to someone, doing it's justified by saying, violence isn't only limited to physical harm, but it can also include things like verbally berating someone or psychological abuse and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So because you can extend it to the non-physical realm in that way, then those more abstract kind of ideas, they can kind of open the door to just saying that just saying something that's mean or not part of or that's racist or something like that, that's doing violence.
Mm-hmm.
So then all of a sudden those reasonable types of censorship, which is to stop the incitement to violence, are now just the exact kind of censorship that we wanted to avoid going to in the first place. Right? We're saying now that it is okay to just censor things.
Right.
If you have some kind of rationale for it that's beyond that red line that we used to say was a reasonable and ideal red line.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, like with that example of the changing definition of what incitement to violence constitutes, is there justification for changing that, and is there justification for allowing it to be censored thereafter? If you can validate the claim that incitement to violence now includes offending somebody, if you have an actual justification for that, would it then be acceptable to start censoring those ideas?
Yeah, but then you get this kind of catch-22 though.
Right.
Right? because you have to have the conversation about whether or not that's okay, and then you start doing the censoring that would prevent that kind of conversation happening in the first place. So yeah,
slippery slope, very slippery slope, and I hate it when arguments turn into that. But yeah, it's a, one might be tempted to say it's a difficult topic to broach, this whole idea of censorship. But on the other hand, is it really? Is it really that difficult to just say, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, people want to say that it's morally difficult. I don't think it's morally difficult.
No, it's just a difficult topic to broach. Where do you draw the line between what you can say and what you can't, and what constitutes censorship and what doesn't?
I don't even know that it's. There might be sort of like a making difficult synonymous with complex, and something that's complex isn't necessarily difficult. You just have to put the time in to actually do the due diligence of actually working out the problem, doing the math.
I should have said complex.
Right?
It's a complex problem then. There are a lot of moving parts in this whole censorship debate.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things to take into consideration. It's context. Context matters with everything. Circling back to the Roseanne thing. Was that taken out of context, or did she mean it in a racist way?
Yeah.
Were they justified in therefore censoring her show by canceling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she might be racist, and that might just have been an excuse, but we can't know for sure. There's an ambiguity there. So I think people just need to remember their own imperfect knowledge on stuff, and we got to stop venerating self-righteousness. Basically, we're venerating self-righteousness.
Yeah, the whole idea of destroying the other person's
argument.
Oh
God, I hate that. All those videos about so and so demolishes so and so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate those videos. I hate the titles of those videos because often they're
the clickbait titles.
They're a clip of an actually good debate, maybe, and the worst part is that usually it's a totally benign and cordial exchange that's displayed, but because whoever is actually posting it is doing some kind of
I saw one recently. It was the Matt Dillahunty versus Jordan Peterson debate. It was one clip. It was I think Matt Dillahunty's closing argument or whatever, but the title of the video was Dillahunty destroys Jordan Peterson. But it was a really cordial, like you said, dismantling of his position. Matt Dillahunty didn't chew him out or anything. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, this is the type of argument I've heard consistently. Yeah. It's no different from any of the others, so I disagree with it. That's where it ended. That's your demolishment? Really? That's how you destroy Jordan Peterson? In a way, maybe he did destroy him, but it wasn't worthy of that title. So venerating self-righteousness. Yeah, that's it's becoming more and more prevalent, I think. Anywho, the idea of censorship. Final thoughts on the issue?
Final thoughts. So, I think we just want to be careful not to paint ourselves in a corner with censorship. There are some noble ideas or noble intentions and motives for kind of loosening the prohibition on censorship, but it's a careful what you wish for kind of situation, and I think flirting with censorship even for the right reasons is not a good idea.
I would tend to agree with all of that. As with anything, with the example of rights, grant all rights and remove accordingly. The same with censorship. Allow all ideas, and maybe, I don't know if the same could be said about censorship. Like when it comes to rights, like if someone is whatever, I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Like it's something I'd really have to think about more than the couple of days we've had to put this episode together.
Okay, so I wonder if maybe the fact that we're living so much of our lives online and in virtual space makes it so that we internalize ideas as being more intrinsically part of ourselves and our being, and the rise of the internet is actually partly a cause of this kind of hyperbolic dealing with competing ideas and stuff, and like bringing back the idea of censorship, and some ideas shouldn't be allowed to be expressed and stuff like that. I think it might be coming up specifically because people are growing up in an online world where the ideas are what they are. Like what you're typing on the screen is what you are, kind of thing.
Well, the internet certainly facilitates that. Like it really makes that kind of thing.
Because this thing with the university campuses and all of these kind of shutting down of events and stuff like that, this has come up really specifically with the iGen, like this is the generation like after the millennials, even the ones who were born after 1995, who basically their entire conscious lifetime had for them includes the virtual world,
right?
You know, even millennials, because millennials I think starts in like 1980, they're aware of a world in which their being exists outside of the internet.
Yeah, like I remember when, like, I didn't grow up with the internet. Like I remember my first internet service provider was CompuServe, right? So yeah, like there was a time before the internet that this new iGeneration is just completely unaware of. It's been part of their upbringing since the very beginning, you know, and I think you're absolutely right in that assessment.
Yeah.
I'll classify that as my final thought.
Okay.
This has been Critical Junction episode 42. I'm Mark.
I'm Jill.
And Luke's not here.
Miss you, Luke.
We miss you, Luke. Yeah.
All right.
That was interesting. As always, thanks for listening. And until next time, keep thinking critically.